you gotta decide what matters, and rather than go through the whole sneaking around thing, I think it would be better to just talk about it and then figure out whether you can make it work or not. Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's one of the Ten Commandments that George Carlin would have just thrown right out when he reduced the Ten Commandments down to two, a more workable list in his opinion. His reasoning for throwing out that one being, I don't think you should outlaw fantasizing about another man's wife. His words, not mine. But yeah, I guess cheating has been in the public discourse recently because of the Coldplay CEO, as we can refer to him. Honestly, something I found out after the fact, because everyone was just so hyped up about the fact that the CEO got caught in an affair at a Coldplay concert. No one really mentioned that happened right here in my home state of Massachusetts at Gillette Stadium, somewhere I have actually been before. But anyway, this whole thing got Vox talking about this article called The Uniquely American Panic Over Adultery by Alex Abad Santos. And the graphic is a comic image of what's probably a man cheating on his wife over there with a mistress of some kind. I am very curious to see what Alex has to say. But before we get into that, be sure to give this video a like if you enjoy it. Comment what you think at any point along the way. Subscribe for daily videos of cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. And feel free to join me at the Zillennial Nexus Point Discord. Link will be in the description below. Anyway, let's see what's so uniquely American about this panic over adultery. The tagline is, "The US loves to hate cheaters. The reasons why tell us a lot about how we view marriage." Americans have long considered cheating one of the worst things you can do to another person that doesn't end in jail time. You know what? I just realized he's right. We all consider it such a terrible thing, yet it doesn't result in jail time. I mean, is it really jail worthy? You let me know in the comments down below. We witnessed the ire that messing around incites, second and third hand in July when a kiss cam caught the now infamous Coldplay CEO, not his legal name, and his fellow Coldplay-loving co-worker canoodling during a concert at Gillette Stadium in Massachusetts. After being spotted, the pair quickly separated and ducked, leaving frontman Chris Martin to speculate that they were having an affair. The video quickly became national news, with sleuths revealing the people's real names, Andy Byron and Kristen Cabot, job titles, CEO and head of HR, respectively, and the company they work for, Astronomer, a data platform company. Online vigilantes found and descended on their spouses. Somehow, Martin's own ex-wife, Gwyneth Paltrow, got involved, as part of a joke, not the affair. Byron and Cabot's affair contained a mash of scandalous elements, but there's another reason why it has brought about the swiftest stripe of internet justice seen in recent memory. Americans love an uncomplicated story about a perceived moral failing. Nothing, therefore, brings us together quite like cheating. Yeah, generally speaking, we like a simple good versus evil story, and cheating is easy to turn into the evil or to look at as evil. Byron and Cabot's affair can. Oh, I already read that part. We like when cheaters get caught. We like when cheaters have to pay. We like when cheaters get what we think they deserve. We like the Coldplay cheaters because we really don't like dealing with the concept that infidelity is much more complicated than we want it to be. I mean, how complicated is it? If you're married, you made a vow for life, and you are going back on that vow. Contrary to what Andrew Tate said about how the man can still love his wife if he cheats on her, that's not reality. The reality is you made a lifelong commitment and you are going back on your word. Despite the raft of changes that have come for American relationships, the advent of feminism, the rise and fall of divorce, the bourgeoising world of open marriages, and the bare fact that sneaking around isn't uncommon, adultery is still a big bad thing we can all agree on. Why exactly? Before we continue in the article, I'll tell you why. Or I actually said it earlier. You made a lifelong commitment to someone and you broke your promise. Not to mention, if you went all the way with the other person, who knows if you contracted an STD and passed it on to your primary partner. And this goes for both sexes, by the way. But yeah, there's both the moral issue that I just described, then there's also the practical issue of that. Comment more issues you can think of along the way, or if you have no problem with cheating, feel free to let me know. I'd like to know your reasoning. Americans are profoundly anti cheating and always have been. There's no question about it. Getting cheated on can be horrible, heartbreaking, destabilizing, earth shattering, wildly unfun. Unsurprisingly, cheating's approval numbers are incredibly low, as they should be. Since 2001, Gallup has surveyed Americans about behaviors they find immoral, and cheating has consistently been in the gutter, neck and neck with cloning humans, as 89% of respondents said in 2025. It's morally wrong. That percentage is the same as when the survey was first conducted 24 years ago. It's risen as high as 93% and fallen, but the lowest that figure has ever been was still 85% of respondents declaring cheating unacceptable back in 2023. I'd like to know why that number still fluctuates pretty wild. Okay, it's not that wild because it's an 8% margin from 85% to 93%. And wow, to think that just 2 years ago, it was only considered immoral by 85% of people surveyed. Now it's up to 89% in 2025. Obviously, you're never going to have 100% of people agree that it is wrong. Just like this Fox News survey my abnormal psychology teacher once cited, where 100% of women surveyed, when asked, would you sleep with a complete stranger, gave a hard no. No, really, that was actually a thing. That is one of the rare times that 100% of people on a survey said gave one answer or another. I forget the percentage for the men. I think it might have been around 50-50, or it was some kind of major contrast between whatever the men responded and then and the 100% of women giving a hard no, which my abnormal psychology teacher said this, is because in the event of a pregnancy, women have more to lose. Even when you factor in baby deletion, there's still the effort that they have to go through for the appointment when all is said and done. So, even with that, women still have a little more to lose than men in the event of an unplanned pregnancy. I actually just realized that as I was thinking about this, because my abnormal psychology teacher said what he said about women having more to lose in the event of an unplanned pregnancy. And I just realized, even with modern, more recent developments like baby deletion, they still have to go through the process for it. Okay, let's get back to the article before I really grasp the third rail for too long. We can see this attitude in our simple aphorisms. If they'll cheat with you, they'll cheat on you. Once a cheater, always a cheater, in our Reddit threads and in our TikTok trends. Yeah, because if a relationship starts with cheating, why exactly would they not do it again? Americans' harsh judgment about adultery in general is tied to Americans' surprising static view of marriage. Even though so much, the age when we marry, who we marry, the rates of matrimony and divorce, has shifted over the past several decades, marriage is still largely a revered institution, tied to unique legal and financial protections. Yeah, Matt Walsh is right about how it's a bedrock of modern civilization, but the reason I still would not go out of my way to recommend marriage is because of the divorce courts and such. I mean, I'm not going to try and stop you, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to recommend it. Again, the reason that people still generally feel an ick about cheating is because it's still on paper a lifelong commitment. It's still referred to as such during the actual ceremony, even if it's not being held in a church. Generally, the whoever is administrating the wedding says something like, "As long as you both shall live," or "Till death do us part." I prefer "as long as you both shall live" because that sounds a lot more positive, in my opinion. More positive language, like George Carlin said for his new commandments and the more workable list of the two commandments. Look up the bit yourself. George Carlin, Ten Commandments. In the US, marriage is still largely seen as the be all, end all, final, and only relationship form, says Alexandra Solomon, professor at Northwestern University and psychologist specializing in relationships. This mentality often sees commitment as synonymous with monogamy and commitment as a path to marriage. Solomon cited countries in Western Europe as examples of places that are more relaxed than the US. Compared to the US, many people living in Western European and Scandinavian countries have more diverse views of what marriages constitute and what relationships look like. From a fully committed monogamous coupling with cohabitation and a blending of finances that never results in marriage, to a marriage with consensual non-monogamy, or even just a marriage later in life, perhaps post-children. We have those in here in America. Now, cohabitation that never results in marriage. That describes pretty much all the 20-something-year-olds who move in with their partner but aren't married to them yet, which happens quite a bit. You also have, I'm guessing that consensual non-monogamy is code for open marriage, which is still brought up, and I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it. But if it's consensual, who am I to try and stop you? The marriage later in life, yeah, this happens a lot more often, as I talked about in my video about the Atlantic article about why marriage survives. I have a feeling a lot of the increase in marriages is coming from older couples getting together and getting married, even though they are not going to have kids together unless they adopt. Yeah, older people are getting together like that, like my uncle who got married in his late 40s. Remarried, that is. Getting back to the article, it's not that adultery can't or doesn't occur in these relationships, but it isn't seen as a character failure. Extramarital affairs aren't tethered to one's moral standing. Non-monogamy isn't a sign of moral failure. When you hold marriage up as the pinnacle, a moral pinnacle, as Americans do, Solomon explains, you also set yourself up to hold infidelity as the pinnacle of betrayal. I mean, obviously, if you put something on a pedestal, don't be surprised when it falls hard when the pedestal is kicked out from underneath it. But also, Americans do cheat. People do bad things sometimes, or neutral things if you agree that cheating isn't that bad. If you're among that 11% from this year's survey about that, you probably don't care about it. People do things that other people don't like how my mom goes on her psychotic cleaning frenzies on Sundays, but instead of sitting around the house and getting frustrated with not being able to use the kitchen while she's mopping the floor, I just decide to pack a lunch and go for a walk now. And just stay outside until she leaves for bingo. Problem solved. It's worth keeping in mind that Americans might also be hypocrites. Roughly 1 in 3 couples in the US experiences infidelity, according to research compiled by the Gottman Institute, an organization that counsels couples and trains relationship therapists. Additionally, the 2025 YouGov US survey found that 53% of respondents said they had been cheated on, with 33% responding they had been the cheater. Suffice it to say, these numbers might be an undercount, given that many people may be reticent to divulge a potentially embarrassing and intimate admission to another human, let alone a pollster. Um, wouldn't this be anonymous? Well, I mean, maybe even if it is anonymous, there's also a percentage of people who, I guess if they feel like if they admitted it in that poll, then they would be admitting it to themselves, and then they would feel even worse about it. I'm just speculating here. That said, what these findings do tell us is that the majority of Americans consider adultery morally wrong, and there are still plenty who do cheat. Statistically, we have to infer that some Americans believe cheating is morally wrong and do it anyway. How do we reconcile this tension? Infidelity exists in a world of contradictions. Paul Keeble, the chief strategy officer at Ashley Madison and an expert on the subject of contemporary adultery, tells Vox. Ashley Madison is infamous for its mission to discreetly connect people looking to cheat with one another, and its cheeky motto, life is short, have an affair. Sorry, I had to do that in the Pedro Pascal voice because it started with life. Life, for those of you who have seen Wonder Woman 1984. Life is good, but it can be better. Yeah, that movie was not good, and it could have been way better. Don't even get me started on how they treated Handsome Man and how, if it was Superman doing the exact same thing with Lois Lane's spirit possessing the body of Pretty Woman, Warner Brothers would never have greenlit that script, and if they somehow did, the public would be rightfully pissed off. Keeble, who is Canadian, believes the American relationship to cheating doesn't make much sense on paper, but he compares us children who hate to be told no. Do you mean to say he compares us to children who hate to be told no? Vox, you gotta get a better editor here. The more you tell kids that they shouldn't, say, touch a hot stove, the more inclined they are to put their hand on it. Adults, who are children but older, ostensibly burned their fingers and learned not to grab at hot metal years ago, but failed to extrapolate the bigger lessons about things they're not supposed to do. Yeah, the more you tell anyone they shouldn't do something, you build up this forbidden fruit, if you will, that makes people kind of want to do it more. Like some people I've seen on YouTube have said that to do the opposite of whatever the experts say to do because of the whole situation with the beer bug and everything that's come out since then. Personally, I think if they provide a good reason, we should follow that rule. Even if we don't enjoy it, if they can provide a reason, I have no issue with it. There are also, apparently, smaller paradoxes within this contradiction hypocrisy umbrella theory. Keeble says some of the users on his site cheat to save their sexless, orgasmless marriages. So, Lester Burnham could have, if Ashley Madison had existed in 1999, Lester Burnham could have just gone on there instead of the highlight of his day, as he mentioned in the opening narration. But if you've seen American Beauty, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he could have just used Ashley Madison to fulfill his needs if Carolyn wasn't up for it. I mean, she cheated on him. Go watch American Beauty. Great movie. Keeble concedes that conversations about non-monogamy and divorce or separation may happen, particularly among young millennial and Gen Z couples. Still, citing fragile egos and gender roles, he believes many still don't take the option that respects a partner and spares them hurt. He also says that the most vocal anti adultery advocates tend to be the biggest cheaters, and right now, that's good for business. Keeble notes that trad wife and family influencer content emphasizes conservative, conventional ideas about marriage and puts regressive gender roles on a pedestal. The more people buy into this content, the more potential customers Keeble envisions. So I guess he's just waiting for whoever's in those arrangements to get tired of the same old, or to feel the need for the to explore whatever it is they need to explore. And you know what? You might not be wrong about the biggest cheaters being the most vocal anti-adultery advocates. It's kind of like how male feminists have a consistent pattern of turning out to be creeps. Sneaky fuckers, as Tim Pool calls them. Or how the people, or like Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers says, the people who scream the loudest have the most to hide. That's why I try not to go too hard on anything here, because then I might be accused of having something to hide. But I digress. Keeble said that after the Coldplay CEO fallout, Ashley Madison saw a surge of new signups, averaging 36,000 in the week following, compared to the regular average of 20,000. Keeble surmises there will be enough contradiction and hypocrisy in the US to sustain Ashley Madison's business in the coming years. I mean, the CEO's the Coldplay CEO's first mistake was having an affair, because I don't think the sneaking around would be worth it. Even in a American Beauty style dead bedroom marriage, the whole sneaking around thing just doesn't seem worth it to me. I've been meaning to do a video about how rules aren't really meant to stop the thing completely, just make the sneaking around so difficult that the people who want to do it end up not doing it because they realize it won't be worth sneaking around. But yeah, sneaking around, not fun. So that's why I would not recommend cheating or anything like that. Americans hate cheating so much, except there's another way to look at Americans' elastic relationship to the morality of infidelity. As Keeble notes, the moment an affair involves people we know, perhaps even ourselves, we're a lot more understanding. Suddenly, it all becomes more complicated, and knowing someone is pretty elastic too. One need not look any further than celebrity infidelity scandals to see how differently they're treated. The public reaction to both real and imagined celebrity infidelity often tilts more gleeful and humorous. Take, for example, the story of two star-crossed Good Morning American anchors, both married, which was embraced by fans and tabloids alike. We saw the same energy, even if unfulfilled by the actual players, brought to discussions of the on-set chemistry between Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell, or Kerry Washington and Tony Goldwyn, whose scandal act some hoped to be real. While Ariana Grande and her new boyfriend Ethan Slater received some blowback, the overarching reaction to their synchronized spousal abandonment was muted. Like the Coldplay cheats, these stories involve ideas about workplace romances between people with significant others. Um, Sydney Sweeney wasn't married. She was engaged when they were filming Anyone But You. That's the movie where she and Glen Powell were in. But yeah, I guess some people feel like the likes of Sydney Sweeney and Glen Powell should be together because they had such good chemistry. I guess you could say they both have they both have good genes. Eh? Okay, okay. Let's get back on topic. Even though we in the abstract hate infidelity, there may be times in some of our own lives where we may have forgiven people, Solomon says. With some celebs, we've created narratives around them, imagined who they really are and what they're really like. Every parasocial wrinkle becomes something that makes them more human in our eyes. They can remind us of family members, friends, and even ourselves. Because they do, we give them humanity and grace that we aren't quick to offer strangers, even though these famous people are indeed strangers. And that's Chris Martin of Coldplay. Yeah, parasocial relationships are a thing. And I guess the more we get to know the public image of someone, the more that we tend to care about them to some extent, or something like that. I mean, I know there was the whole. We actually learned more about Sydney Sweeney with the people who dug up the that voter registration of hers because of the American Eagle jeans ad campaign, which just made people on the right like her a lot more. But yeah, I guess if you've seen enough about people like I have a lot of respect for Chuck Norris because I've read his autobiography. And fun fact, he actually cheated on his wife once. No, really. One time, and it resulted in a daughter that he met when she was, I think she was 26 at that point. But anyway, yeah, Chuck Norris is very religious and he has cheated, which actually goes back to the earlier point about how the most anti adultery advocates are the biggest cheaters, though. In this case, Chuck Norris has actually acknowledged that he shouldn't have cheated on his wife. It is what it is. Chuck made his choices, and now he has another daughter and more grandkids as a result. In his words, God took what the devil intended for evil, which in this case was cheating on his wife at a drive-in movie and turned it into something positive. In this case, the conception and the later revelation of his daughter existing, and then meeting her and not needing to take the DNA test to know she was his daughter. Okay, let's get back to the article. I'm getting off topic. The Coldplay couple? We have no backstory, so it's very easy to vilify both of them, Solomon says, pointing out that people quickly jumped onto the narrative that both were betraying their spouses. Granted, the way Byron and Cabot reacted, they were caught red-handed. No, they weren't caught in 4K, they were caught in 8K. High dynamic range for the world to see. Okay, I'm pretty sure the cell phone video is a way lower resolution than that. But the Jumbotron, that is like the highest resolution you can be caught in. But there wasn't any room made to consider other possibilities, such as being in an open relationship, being camera shy, going into hiding for totally different reason, before the chase to find out every detail about them began. Well, they chose to go into a Coldplay concert where there was the possibility of appearing on the Jumbotron. I would not be surprised if somewhere on the ticket information was that something about by entering Gillette Stadium, you consented to appear on the Jumbotron. They're less sympathetic to us because we don't know them and we can't put ourselves into the narrative, Solomon adds. It all comes back to the stories we like to tell ourselves. It's worth noting, though, that not all celebrities get off so easily, especially men who have made their marriage part of their appeal. Yeah, some people just like the thrill of cheating. I mean, I don't get it because there's so much sneaking around that's required to make it work so it doesn't all come crumbling down like the situation with the Coldplay CEO. But I digress. Why we like telling ourselves simple stories about cheaters. Perhaps the simple story Americans tell ourselves about cheating being flatly unforgivable until the GMA anchors do it is for sanity's sake. Infidelity hinges upon trust, a thing so special that we only allow certain people in our lives to have it. When trust is betrayed, it opens up a world of other anxieties. A debilitating number of what if scenarios and doubts come into play. So why not just lock that person out before they can hurt again? I mean, there's a time and place for second chances, but if it's a marriage and you made that vow for life in front of everyone at that wedding, yeah, it's kind of a big vow to break. That narrative almost always places us as the wronged party. Cheating, in the public imagination, always happens to us. We don't like to picture ourselves doing adultery, committing betrayal, and asking for forgiveness. Adulterer isn't an identity many people claim, and for good reason. Most people are not serial betrayers. Carrie Cole, a counselor and the research director for the Gottman Institute, tells me. Cole, who's studied and counseled couples through affair recovery, tells me that while people are no doubt capable of being deceptive and manipulative, she also sees many cheating partners find themselves embarrassed, ashamed, and guilty about the damage they caused. She also said that while options like an open marriage or divorce might seem like clear, more respectable options instead of adultery, a common refrain is that having all these alternatives makes cheating ostensibly more painful. Affairs can happen in all kinds of relationships, no matter the rules of that relationship. Some people who have affairs are likely going against their own morals and values. Understanding what drives people to infidelity is probably more useful than writing them off as human beings. Yeah, they should commission studies on why people get into have affairs and such to better understand it. Even though the likes of Matt Walsh would be like, it's simple, it's obvious. They are moral failures. Whereas I have no problem with understanding why exactly they do it so that maybe it can be prevented in the future, or it'll give people the ability to detect red flags with their partners so that they can break up on their terms or something like that if it's that bad or if it's that obvious. Kind of like how I learned in freshman year of college, the introduction to communication classes, we learned that Mustache Man, as we'll refer to him, and his communication methods were studied after the end of World War II to better understand why people went along with the atrocities he did with World War II Germany. Not because we particularly wanted to know the inner machinations of the man who is one of the very few people who is just objectively pure evil, but so that we could understand how people could be led to, could be, how he convinced people to commit the atrocities that they committed, as shown in the movie Schindler's List. Anyway, let's get back to the article. We are finally nearing the end. Cole referenced the book Not Just Friends by the late Shirley Glass, which explains that cheating is more complex than we like to think. Infidelity is not just a calculus of lies and sex. Glass, who is a psychologist, theorized that sometimes infidelity can begin with making small, seemingly harmless emotional connections, getting caught up, and not creating boundaries. The point is not that this is excusable, but that sometimes the why or how of infidelity can be a bit more complicated than we like to think. So you're telling me there are more layers to it than scenes on the hub of a wife going for the guy who's cleaning the pool. Examining why people cheat and what humans seek in infidelity is also at the core of psychotherapist Esther Perel's work. Whether it's feelings of being trapped in the role of a doting mother or a lack of physical intimacy, American Beauty right there, Perel posits that affairs can show us things, perhaps even desires, that are missing in relationships and marriages. Probably things you should talk to your partner about before you go and ruin everything, like Star-Lord in Avengers Infinity War when he found out what happened to Gamora. Yeah, I know it's been 7 years, but It's all Star-Lord's fault. Peril poses questions about the magnitude of our morals and desires, why we hold these beliefs, such as marriage equals transparency and monogamy, so strongly. She shows couples that it's possible to come back from this kind of violation. Not easy, but technically possible. Just because Americans see infidelity as an explicit transgression doesn't mean it shouldn't be examined. Our mistakes can tell us about who we are, no matter how much we dislike and said mistakes. Perhaps this is why so many people are reluctant to forgive or extend empathy to cheaters. It's much easier to write someone off when we think we could never be like them. Yeah, I agree it should be examined just like Mustache Man's style of persuasion should have been examined after was rightfully examined after World War II, not because we particularly wanted to know the inner machinations of Mustache Man's mind. We wanted to make sure that we knew how he did it so that we could make sure that an atrocity like the one shown in Schindler's List can never happen again. I obviously don't condone anyone having an affair, but it's very easy to sit in judgment, in condemnation of one, Cole says. It's sometimes not as clear cut and simple as what people want to make it to be. Yeah, there might be more nuanced thoughts going through people's heads, but again, the Matt Walshes of the world are going to be like, it's quite simple. They had the choice to not engage in that affair, and they chose to engage in that affair. And as a result, ruined the relationship because of that. Me personally, again, I'm all for examining the finer details of why they would do that just for the sake of better understanding what leads to it. And what I would recommend is you just talk about things you want and then work it out as adults to either figure out a way to make it work, figure out whether you really want it or not, or if you really want it, you just get up and leave if you're not married. Because at a certain point, you gotta decide what matters, and rather than go through the whole sneaking around thing, I think it would be better to just talk about it and then figure out whether you can make it work or not. And if you can't make it work, you decide what you want to do from there. Within a narrative like that of the Coldplay cheaters, whatever complex anxieties and feelings we have about trust in relationships get flattened into something deliriously simple. The alternative, hard won sympathy, the possibility for forgiveness, empathizing with the pain of everyone involved, is a lot less entertaining and more somber than the Philly fanatic reenacting the most humiliating moment of someone's life. The truth is, there's a disconnect between what Americans believe about cheaters and how we think about ourselves and the people we're sympathetic to. In the US, there's a dogmatic understanding of matrimony that necessarily can't apply to all the many, many marriages out there, and a culture that clings to the roots of that institution even as it changes. Despite it all, There are capacities for shame, forgiveness, and redemption. We just don't seem to want to make room for them. A story that complicated wouldn't be nearly as effective in bringing us all together. I'm going to wrap it up here before I hit the third rail again. You let me know in the comments down below what you think of all this. You let me know what you think about the views on this, whether you think there's more nuance or if you're a Matt Walsh type who thinks cheating is wrong no matter what. I'd love to hear the reasoning for it. Don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for daily videos of cultural commentary and rants from a man caught between generations. And last but certainly not least, be sure to join the Zillennial Nexus to Point Discord. Link is in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.